Good afternoon. I don't think, I'm not sure if Michael's going to make it on or not. We'll see how that shakes out. But I'm here, and isn't that the most important thing? Oh, sorry, I cracked myself up. So hopefully Michael will be in. We do have Sandra Trawick with us, and we do have Representative Brad Boles. So we are about ready to go. I'm going to give us just maybe a few more minutes to collect some viewers, because I think we had quite a bit of interest in this particular podcast. So if you did not, I will do this, and I will talk briefly about our morning podcast, which was very heavily viewed. We talked about if you wanted to mount your own campaign for office, how you would do that. And I think it was, it went a little long, as they kind of tend to, but just break it up into spots, or listen to it while you're, and there's Julia. Good morning. Good afternoon, Julia. Break it up or listen to it while you're doing something. That's kind of how I do mine, is I just, pop them in, and, but give it a listen, because I thought there was some really interesting discussion, not just about how to run for office and what you might think about doing, but also what happens when we get more than one or two people who want to run for an office. Are there potential issues there? What does that look like? So I think we had some really good conversation. So do look that one up. And don't forget, we'll be having our regular one on Friday morning with the Pike-Off ladies will be with us to talk more about what happened with legislation with Pike-Off. So I am going to bring in Representative Brad Boles this afternoon. Hello, Representative. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I really do appreciate you doing this. And I'm going to bring Sandra, our friend Sandra Trawick, on, who got this started because she picked a fight with you on your Facebook page.
It's what I'm known for.
I just know that elected officials are like, oh, social media. And it's funny because there are some good things about it, but then there are also some downsides too. And some of them, are, and you and I were talking about this before we came on, Representative Boles. Sometimes you can talk across each other, and then that's not really helping, because we need to talk to each other and not across each other. So I think, so I really appreciate you doing this, because Sandra and I both are extremely critical of this legislation. And so talking to you about it, I think, is going to help tease out a lot of different aspects of it. So,
well, hopefully, Sandra wasn't happy with my CLO bill, and we talked, and she got them. We were on the same page, so maybe there's hope that can happen again.
Oh, well, that time we can't always meet. That time I was, and I would like to talk about that. I think you should talk about that a little bit and clarify some things, because we're actually seeing stuff coming down the pike on CLO already And I really wish your bill would have passed because it at least would have given us a little protection. So
Right.
hopefully Jenny will let you address that too.
Well, yeah, mention first of all, CLO, Commission of Land Office. The Commission of the Land Office is made up of cabinet member posts, but not just is Secretary Walter or is Superintendent Walters, is he a cabinet post? Is that a cabinet post?
I would think so, because all of the CLO money that they make goes back to the schools. And so I would think that he would be on there as well.
I was going to say something, but I think I'm going to not say that. I was going to say
we should have you on the show next.
Do what?
I think the governor, lieutenant governor, state treasurer, state auditor.
Yes.
And probably state superintendent. I think they're all on the board.
Yes. And so what they do is they manage land that has been put into I think it's a trust, isn't it a trust?
I believe so.
And it's ostensibly in case schools need to grow and they need extra land, then they have this land there available to do that. But in the meantime, what the CLO does is manage that land in order to make sure that Oklahomans it's not just sitting there fallow, that Oklahomans are actually earning something on the land that is CLO land. So what they do is if some farmer comes to them and says, hey, I want to lease that property, then they make a decision of whether or not they're going to lease the property and for how much and that kind of thing. So it's not just farmers anymore, right? Now it's green energy companies and things like that are approaching the CLO and asking for leases for their businesses. So now that people know what that is, so tell us about your CLO bill.
Right. So the Commission Land Office, they have billions of dollars in investments, and a lot of it's in the stock market. And so, and the stock market can be volatile at times. And so they also have diversity in their portfolio with actually land and buildings. And so, and their mission in CLO, and I believe they're in the Constitution, this mission, is to maximize the return on their assets. And that return that they get annually goes back to the school district spread out over Oklahoma, back into the funding formula to give schools more money. And so that's what their mission is. And that's why we were in that bill. I believe it was Senate Bill 915. And what we were seeing is a lot of the, I think almost 10,000 acres, 4 different solar leases have been leased on CLO land as of right now, this moment. And what we were concerned with, and really this was Chairman Green in the Senate, his bill at the beginning, and I was a House author, but we worked with like the Cattlemen's Association, Farm Bureau, the Farmers and Ranchers. And what their concern is, they get 5-year leases to farm and ranch this land. And at the end of the 5 years, they have to go back out for bid. And what we're seeing is some of those, as they go back out for bid, these solar companies are bidding on that land, and you can't compete. Like the money that they're willing to pay for that land is way more than farmers and ranchers can afford. And so what we're seeing is we're losing a lot of our CLO land that farmers and ranchers have leased maybe for decades. And now they're losing that opportunity because as a state, we're saying, hey, we can make more money with solar than, and to CLO's credit, I bet with them many times, and they said, look, we have to do what the statute says that we have to do, and the statute says we have to maximize our return. Now, if you want to tell the statute something differently, then we'll do something differently. And that's what our bill did, is it basically put a thing in process where if farmers and ranchers are leasing that land, or maybe they're grazing on it, where solar would have to build, it's called agrivoltaics is the term, but they would have to build their solar panels 8 feet high clearance. So basically anything under 8 feet could walk through there. Grass could still grow. They have to do it so many feet apart from each other, like a section. And so the thought was, number one, we could actually, for CLO, get diversity as far as continue allowing farmers and ranchers to lease that property. And solar would still have that opportunity to make a lease as well, potentially. But I understand that solar companies were like, well, like if you do this, most likely going forward, it would be too expensive for us to, build these panels 8 feet high and go through all this process, where we could just go to a private landowner, make a deal with a private landowner, and then stay off of CLO land. So really, that's kind of what the bill did. It passed the House and Senate, and the governor ended up vetoing it. And the veto got overridden in the Senate. It came to the House. It's a partisan bill. It passed the Senate with partisan support. All Republicans voted yes. All Democrats voted no. So when it came to the House, I knew. So let me rephrase this as well. To override a governor veto, you have to have 2/3 plus 1. Well, if you have an emergency on the bill, you got to have 3/4 plus 1. We had an emergency on the bill because we were concerned that if the bill doesn't go into effect until 90 days or even November, that there would be a lot of leases that just pop up between now and then. And so we wanted it to go into effect as quick as we could, but it backfired on us because we didn't have the votes to overturn it, because at that time we had 82. It's kind of a math game. It was that last night of session, and we had 82 people in the House. 66 were Republicans, 16 were Democrats. I had to have 76 votes. And so, in other words, I had to have 10 of the 16 Democrats to vote for it. And I did get some of their support, just not enough. I didn't get 10 people to commit to voting for it. I think 6 Democrats said they would help. That still got us 4 votes short. If you try to override a veto and you don't get the votes to do it, that bill is not just dead for this year, but it's dead for next year. Where if we keep it alive next year, we can come back and potentially look at overriding it at that time when we have more people in the House to vote on it. And so that's the end result. And I think the governor's message was that it would stifle future development on CLO land with solar, which I think he's probably right. It probably would, because I think they would be forced to most likely go seek private landowner deals, which I still think is a win-win, because if it's your land and you have 100 acres, I believe you have that ability to make that decision. If it's on CLO land and you are leasing that land, I feel really bad for the farmers and ranchers that have a lot of investment in that property over the years. Now they're getting kicked out of it for CLO and they have nowhere to go. But if you make that decision on your own property, that's your own decision. But and so that was the reasoning for the bill. There was a lot of confusion at first, because some people thought at first that we were encouraging solar on CLO land, but that wasn't. We were basically just trying to, number one, either let solar work with farmers and ranchers at the same time, or most likely, like I said, they would probably end up just leaving CLO land going forward and just doing it on private land, which would allow the farmers and ranchers to continue to get their 5-year leases every 5 years. And so that's what that bill was. So we'll look at that next year and see if we have support going forward on that. But I know that's probably not what we're here to talk about today, but we could at least give a little summary of that bill as well.
Can I try?
No, I think that's great. But we are here to talk about the behind the meter legislation specifically. Oh, sorry.
I want to talk about that one too.
Okay.
So my 2 cents on that is, so they're supposed to maximize their return on their assets. Their biggest assets, I believe, are the children going to school, not these financial assets. And so, how about we start investing in providing healthy food from farmers that these children can actually operate their brains on, and not cloned meat, not any of these other things that we're now allowing in our food and in our children's lunches. I mean, we could support our kids, support their brains, support their health, and a much greater return on investment. As far as this, I know one of the arguments that we talked about, and I appreciate, I wanted to chime in, Representative Boles, when I thought the CLO thing, I thought initially that they did not already allow solar on the land, but they do, which we're seeing coming down the pike now. So when we discussed this, it was originally 6 feet tall panels. And after we discussed, and I had done some research, then Representative Boles, kudos to you, you raised it to 8 feet instead of 6 feet. So, I want to encourage people to reach out to representatives, because after we discussed it and I had done a video about it, bashing it because I didn't like that we were going to allow solar on farmland. And then he reached out to me, and then he adjusted the bill based on that conversation, which I appreciated that. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. But I also, we discussed how this bill I believe it should have completely banned solar on CLO land which looking at where you're coming from, that never would have passed because you don't have the support for it. But I'm tired of having bills that don't pass that would have been the best legislation we could have had. Now I feel like farmers have the right to sue because we're not allowing industry to industry. Farmers get a 5-year lease. That's an industry. And then solar gets a 50. How many years does solar get?
I believe I've heard 55. And I don't know if they're all like that, but up to 55.
Yeah. And wind gets 55. And so this is discrimination against farmers and ranchers straight up. And so when farmers have invested in this land, but until farmers get on the ball and start either taking back their rights, or if they aren't heard in the legislature, they're going to have to sue for it. And I hate that. That's always last resort. But here we have discrimination against one industry over another. And with oil and gas, you could have an oil rig on that land and still put your cows on it. You won't be able to with this solar. That's going to eliminate farming and ranching on how many thousands of acres do we have in Oklahoma on CLO land, Representative Boles?
I don't have the total number, but it's a lot.
I have 55, but I don't think that's right. I think it's way more than that. 55,000?
I think it's probably over 100,000.
Somebody in the comments needs to look that up and tell us, because it's a lot of land that we could potentially lose to industry, like AI data centers, which goes to our next discussion.
Yeah, and I will say, obviously it's my bill, so I'm not here to defend the other side of the argument because, but right. I always try to look at the whole picture and look at all sides and try to figure out where there may be common ground. One pushback that we had, which I think is a fair argument, is not all CLO land is agriculture related. I mean, it just may be land that's not productive for agriculture and it's just sitting there. And so their question to me is like, well, we understand why you're doing what you're doing for ag land, but what about the land that has nothing going on it? It's not productive for agriculture. And why are you making us put the panels up 8 foot tall there versus, which honestly is a good point. And so, like I said, I'm not here to debate against my bill, but I mean, there are good points on all sides. And I think the overall net was a positive if the bill would have passed, but also see some of the talking points on the other side of where they have concerns as well. And, and you talked earlier about, why do we keep passing bills that aren't exactly the way you want them, but maybe they're halfway? And honestly, what I've learned, and this is my 9th session, is you can try to get 100% of what you want at the Capitol, and very rarely do you get that. Normally, you try to get 40 or 50% of what you want that year, and then the next year you come back and try to chip away at another 10 or 20%, and the next year. Now, when you look up over an 8 or 9 year period, you look back and you're like, hey, we've made a lot of progress. Now, each year you may be frustrated because you didn't get as far as you wanted, but that's kind of how I've taken things in the legislature is, look, it's a long game. And if you try for the Hail Mary, so to say, in football terms, you're usually going to come up with an incomplete pass, not a touchdown. And so try to take the 10-yard pass, a 20-yard pass. And then when you look up in 5 or 10 years, you've made it all the way down the field versus every year you go for the touchdown and get nothing. And you look back up in 10 years and you've got nothing done. And so that's kind of how I approach legislation is try to work with everyone when we have concerns, try to get common ground to get something passed. And then next year, let's work on those concerns and try to go farther. So I don't know if that helps any at all, but that's the approach I've taken. And I feel like over time, it's the best approach. But that particular year, you may feel like you weren't as successful as you'd like to be.
Well, if you don't mind, let me throw in a couple of comments that we've had so far, because I think this one's pretty good. Like legalizing the lottery, casinos, and the marijuana industry to make schools the best in the nation. And I totally see Dorn's point, because we keep doing these things that I don't think are benefiting Oklahomans well enough. And I mean, I don't want to get into those conversations today because I want to stick to what we're saying, but I do think there's a good point in that. And then he asked how many legislators and OFB members are receiving substantial amounts of farm subsidies claiming school lease land.
I mean, I can't answer that. I can tell you I'm not one of them. So I know that. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
So, well, and then Julia says we have farmers that get elected to office and stab their fellow farmers and ranchers in the back. Slow and steady wins the race. Is CRP land the same as CLO? I have in my notes 640 acres of CRP in Oklahoma.
Do you know what that stands for?
No.
Me neither.
I don't. CRP, Robert, do you know?
Is that the conservation? I think
I was trying to think. I don't know.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Julia says public property is an oxymoron. Government should not own land. Are passing bills the measure of success?
Can I chime in on this?
I can answer on that. On passing bills, measure of success. I think it depends on the bill.
Yeah.
But it depends, like if you can get 50% across the field here on a bill, even though you didn't get to the 100-yard, the touch the end zone, I feel like some people would say that's a failure. Some people would say it's a success. But over time, I think if you keep chipping away, that you get where you want to get to. But I don't think legislators, I mean, sometimes you get up there and you're like, hey, how many bills can I get passed? But really, back home, my constituents, they don't really care if I pass 3 bills or 20 bills. I think they just want something that was substance, and they want to know that you did make a difference up there, and that you are accessible when you have constituent issues, and you're there to help them. I think that's
okay. Well, then if you don't mind, let me dovetail off of that. So I'm going to ask you the question. I talk about this a lot, and I'll ask you the question. So what is your job? What's your main job as a legislator?
Well, in my opinion, the main job is to best represent your people in your district.
Okay, so what does represent, then let's go this way. What does representation look like for the people in your district?
So for me, everyone has different districts, right? Different dynamics. But I think, number one, what your district's like when you campaign, because you go knock on a lot of doors, you hear a lot of feedback, you go to all the community events, you go to all the different forums, you hear a lot of pushback and on what's important to the district, and then staying in communication with them. Email, during session, people call you, they email you, Facebook message you, text message you. There's so many different ways people get a hold of you, and trying to best understand where your district stands on issues. But at the end of the day, we're a republic, not a democracy. And so when we elect someone, they go up to the Capitol and they have to take all that information in and make a decision on what best, in their opinion, represents what their district would want them to do. And so that would be my 2 cents on how to best represent people. And not that I'm like perfect at that, because I definitely am not. I try my best, but like anyone else, I have my own mistakes that happen sometimes, and all you can do is try to make them right when that happens. And I've been very firm on different stances as well, but then there's also been times where my stance has changed based on more information I received or constituent feedback back home, and I'm like, hey, I thought I was in this position, but maybe I wasn't looking at that the right way, or maybe I've learned more about that issue. And you have to be willing to be flexible to make adjustments.
Right. So I am Representative Banning's weighed in, and I'll throw that up there in just a second. But and I say this all the time. So every legislator that's elected, every person that's actually elected as a representative, the main goal is to protect the liberty of the people in their district. So when you talk about liberty of the people in your district, you're talking about allowing them to have the most unfettered access to all of the gains of their industry, right? So that means low taxation, not taking their land away from them through eminent domain. So just whatever, and I'll put up what Representative Banning says, the government is instituted for the protection, security, benefit, and well-being of the people. And the problem with that is, to me, I mean, we argue about all the wrong things. It's like we argue over the Commerce Clause, right? In the Constitution. So you could always say, okay, well, if it's a benefit for the CLO to put, it's a benefit of the people for the CLO to put on, put solar panels on so people can have, this money. Well, then you have to stop and back up and think to yourself, how much of a benefit is that actually? What about the people who live around? Around that area? Is that protecting their liberty? I mean, might the instances of fire from the batteries cause them to maybe in some way lose their property? So to me, everything centers around the person and their individual liberty. So, and Representative Banning says that's the second part of Article 2, Section 1.
Right.
So,
And whenever I said represent the people, I think representing them in those ways, right? Protecting them, making sure they have their rights and their liberty that the Constitution. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the part where I'm going to come in with the hard questions then. Okay. So you did this behind the meter legislation, and I'm just going to give a rundown of it, and then you tell me where I've gone off track. So sure. The behind the meter legislation allows private industry to be able to create their own energy to use for that business that is not pulling off the general grid. So it allows them to create like a natural gas plant. I mean, there are all kinds of different ways. Usually it's done solar. I mean, that's what historically in America, this type of legislation has been solar, putting solar panels on roofs, for example, so the businesses can make money from that and sell it back to the electric provider, for example. So that's the bottom line of the bill. Am I wrong? Or am I?
Somewhat. So the people that had like solar panels on their roof, they could already do that. And
right,
so
correct.
That's not really being affected. And so I would say the majority of people that have behind the meter, we're talking large industry, large energy consumption type companies. Data centers are one as well. And basically, we're allowing them to do, like you said, have their own investment. And why that's important is right now, there's going to be over $1 trillion projected over the next 10 to 15 years in new energy generation investments for the demand of energy that we're going to see over the next 10 to 15 years. And so what you see going on in a lot of other states is these companies will come into the state and let's say they're in PSO territory, OG&E territory, GRDA, or a co-op in Oklahoma territory. Those companies have an obligation to serve every customer at their market. And so if they have to build extra infrastructure to cover their grid that they're reliable for, that costs money. It's expensive to build out generation. You're seeing right now with PSO, they just purchased a natural gas plant in Jinx, I think, for like $800 million. And what you're seeing is do that acquisition, which I'm not saying it's not needed because their demand is increasing significantly. But with that being said, there's a 5% rate going in effect in July, which is like $7 per consumer on average for residences to help cover that infrastructure. And so the point of this bill is we know there's going to be a lot of infrastructure going forward in the future in Oklahoma to provide for our needs for energy. But if we have these huge consumers, these industry data centers or whatever that are going to take a gig of power or 500 megawatts to up to a gig of power, that's a big drain on the whole grid in itself. And so what would have to happen is most likely whatever territory they're in, would probably have to build more generation to cover that center. And with that being said, at some point, two things happen. One, the ratepayers have to cover that infrastructure cost over time. And number two, if they build out their generation and that company goes out of business, which happens, right? Business people go out of business at times. What happens if you build that huge infrastructure, the company goes out of business, and now your rate base already is committed on the hook for that cost, and now your consumer that was going to pay you back over time is out of business. And so what this does is it basically takes that risk from the rate base, from the ratepayers on infrastructure costs going forward on that large consumer power, and also takes away the risk of that company going out of business, which is a big risk as well. And so, and then also thirdly, it protects the grid reliability. Right now, if a big data center came in, it could take 3 or 4 years for Southwest Power Pool, which is the overall grid that we're a part of in Oklahoma, to approve that type of power, because now I think they should be quicker, and they're working at getting that down to about 12 to 24 months versus 3 to 4 years, which I think needs to happen. But more importantly, it's important that they study that grid, because they want to find out, okay, if we're going to add this much power here, what is that going to do to the rest of the ratepayers as far as grid reliability? Can we do that here? Do we need to go somewhere else? And so that study takes a while to do. And so this will allow these companies to go around that study because they're not pulling from that same grid. And so it helps speed up investment. It also helps speed up economic development. And if they ever do want to attach to the grid in the future, they would have to go through that system and get that approval and go through that study process before they could ever get to the grid. And so that's what behind the meter does. Honestly, it's a ratepayer protection bill. And now not all companies are going to go behind the meter, because personally, I had a large manufacturing business. We had to have 24/7 reliability. And so one good thing about whether it's the co-ops or OG&E and PSO, they have a lot of grid reliability. They have a lot of duplicative power. So if they have one issue somewhere else, they can pull power from a different area. Well, if you're behind the meter on your own, like you're on your own. So if your system goes down, like there's no one there to help you. And so there is risk for these people to do this. But with that being said, if private industry wants to spend their own money to build out their own generation and take their own risk, I think that's a good thing.
Okay, well, so I'm going to stop you there and just say this. So what is their own money?
So good question. So we're talking, maybe it's a data center, and maybe the data center hires a private energy company that builds power generation, and they work out a private sector deal between two different groups to build out their power station at that location. Either way, it's two private businesses working together, signing contractual agreements between the two, versus
right. But what I'm trying to ask utility is what to you makes a private business? And well, here's the reason why I'm asking this.
Sure.
So there are a lot of, in your specific instance, because you just committed to a large project in the Chickasha area, mm-hmm. and that it looks as though it's going to be a data center is what they were talking about initially. So they're talking about private investment, but when is private investment not private investment? So how much tax incentive from the state or the federal government would that project receive?
That's a good question. In Chickasha, I'm not aware of the city actually had the industrial park that they had for decades. And basically, I think they ended up selling that industrial park through the vote of the city council to a developer, where so the city actually made money off that. And now that developer is working out deals with these companies that come in to locate to. And so I would say that's private business working with private business once the developer buys the land. Now, is there going to be incentives from the local city or state? Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure, like any business, there's incentives Oklahoma already has for businesses in general, whether it's quality jobs program, whether that's different capital expenditures that's already in statute. But I don't think there's any special carve out that I'm aware of for this project in Chickasha. And that's what I think is pretty unique about behind the meter, because whenever you're talking about in the past, if we're trying to recruit $1 billion plus company to Oklahoma, they always wanted a lot of taxpayer money. And so behind the meter is basically saying, hey, we're not giving them money to come here. We're just letting them do their own investment. And we stay out of the way. Government stays out of the way. Let the private sector figure out their own needs for this power generation. And then they take the risk. And to me, I mean, it's a win-win on that situation.
So I'm going to go back to Canoe. And, anytime taxpayer funds are behind anything, you're risking more than, even though Canoe is a private company, right? But it got a whole lot of taxpayer subsidies, and that business is gone. Because it was in a very old business and there wasn't a lot of historical data to really back that up. But our state gave them, tens of thousands of our dollars to be able to do something that would not have survived in the free market.
Right.
And, now it's gone away. I want to go through a couple of.
Well, and I think that's the difference here, Jenny, is with behind the meter, we're not having to give anyone any money. Like they're making these investments in Oklahoma without the state saying, hey, come here, we'll give you X amount of money.
So let me be specific about that, because you're 100% right. And I totally see that. And in some sense, I'll even say, I think that makes sense, because if you have a data center coming in, they're going to pull a crap ton of energy off of that electrical grid.
Right.
And that can cause brownouts for people, around, you run your air conditioner. Oops, well, we can't do that because the data center is working today. So I can see the facility of that. But what I'm more getting at is, we do this legislation and it attracts certain companies, and those companies come into Oklahoma. And because our governor is we need Oklahoma to be a top 10 state, we want to do everything that we can do to make that happen. It includes a lot of taxpayer giveaways. And so when you're talking about behind the meter legislation for private industry to come in and do what private industry would do, that would be fine if private industry were using private industry funds.
But hold on, wait, they are. We're using, what was the deal with Saudi Arabia? Wasn't it Saudi Arabia? Billions of dollars for AI data centers in the 8 states that were handshake deals, apparently. And one of them was Oklahoma. And so what's their return on investment? Why wasn't it the Saudi Arabians? Wasn't that who it was? It was back in January, February. So why would they be throwing billions of dollars into AI data centers? What's the return on their investment to put those in Oklahoma? And,
well, I think.
Hold on. So what was that bill? I believe it was it Josh West's bill on how Oklahoma has been essentially allowing our data, our biometric data, our irises, our walking gait, our facial recognition, everything.
The privacy, that was a privacy data bill. Leader West ran that.
Yeah, great
really,
bill.
It was actually bipartisan. Leader Josh West and Colin Walkie, who's a pretty liberal Democrat.
Yeah, and
both teamed up together on that. I don't remember the bill number. They ran it every year for like 4 or 5 years.
Right, and it put bare.
I support that bill. It passed the House multiple times. Yeah.
And why has that not been signed into law? Because currently, we Oklahomans are fair game for data centers to collect all of our personal data, what makes us who we are, our DNA, everything, and sell it. So that's where I come back to, why is Oklahoma one of the top 8 states? Why have we not passed that 50-page bill protecting us to even a small degree? I think if you sued because you were stolen in identity, the money went to the Attorney General's office. But anyway, that bill itself wasn't even good enough, and we can't get it across the finish line. So we have
Yeah.
no protections whatsoever in our state of having our data collected, flock cameras, all of that, and then sold. So why wouldn't they invest here? Because their
Yeah.
return on
Well,
investment is us.
I mean, I don't think that's the reason they're investing here. I think there's a
Well,
lot of reasons, and like I said, I supported that bill, and I think it passed the House multiple times, and I voted for it every time.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, just like in our business here, where I'm at right now, officing, we used to have hard servers, brick and mortar servers that were in our office, where now we went to servers on the cloud, and everything's backed up on the cloud and everything's protected on the cloud. So if this office burns down, we have protection. We can pull everything back, and all of our computers are backed up on the cloud. And so when I'm saying that, I'm just saying business in general and a lot of individuals in general have a lot of data that are being backed up. This podcast right here is online, and we couldn't do this without data,
the AI,
without the
data.
internet, without, and you can go back and I've done this before, Jenny. I go back to previous of your podcast and kind of watch some other people and what topics you have, but all of that's stored somewhere, right? And so that's where the AI is coming in. And just look at your house. I know my house. I grew up. We had one TV, probably about the size of this computer screen that I'm on right now. We had 6 people in our household, and we had one TV in the living room. And 90% of the time, my mom and dad got to choose what we watch. And where now every room has a TV, and everyone has a computer, and everyone has a phone and a device, and all these things are going to the cloud. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is where the country is going and where the future of the world's going is it's all data driven. It's all technical. And so that's why there's going to be a huge demand on these type of products. I mean, look at Facebook. I remember it started when I was in college, and only a few people are on it. And now, tons of people, and you have all these other social media platforms, and they all get all their storages backed up somewhere. And so it just keeps going on and on and on. And so I think that's why the future, even we had a manufacturing business, almost 500 employees that our family had. And when we first started in 1973 of this business, there was no computers, no machines. It was all literally physical labor, people welding, machining, or welding, torching, painting. Where you look fast forward, 50 years, and now the company is fully, pretty automated, CNC machinery, sheet metal, robotic welders. It's just way more technical. The world is, and with all of these jobs that I think are going to happen, according to President Trump, I think there's going to be a lot of onshoring coming back to America, but it won't be the same type of jobs that were here when they left to go to China and India and wherever. And so they're going to be more automated, which takes more, AI data, all that kind of stuff. So I think,
and I'm going to move off of this because we've got a couple comments I want to get in here, but it takes human jobs. And I think that's an issue. If we're going to protect people's liberty, then they have liberty to be able to make their own living.
I agree.
And so I think that needs to be factored in there. So Catherine says, Commissioner Todd Hyatt was cautious against this, wasn't convinced proper guardrails were in place to protect ratepayers against future downturn in value of PSO investment. Commissioner Kim David referenced plans for the $4 billion aluminum plant for Port of Inola as an investment that will require increased power protection. Microgrids are what it's called. Oklahoma produces 62% more energy than it consumes. Why do we need to build more energy production so as to destroy our landscapes and communities to financially benefit a few? And when Dorn talks about financially benefiting a few, I want to be very specific about that. So part of the explosion in the data centers that are going on is because lots of rich people like to invest money. Mm-hmm. And so this to them is a new investment endeavor. It's a new frontier of investment, and they have, this money that they want to be able to invest. They can burn it if it doesn't work out, that's fine. So they're throwing lots of money into this. and it's for them to make the money off of. But then the people in the town have maybe 5 jobs, because data centers really, it's a computer. There are no jobs there. We're taking the jobs from the humans and giving them to zeros and ones. So
Yeah.
there aren't any jobs there. So
Well, I would say, Jenny, from my understanding, a large data center will employ around 40 to 100 people, depending on the data center. And that's
I've
what
never
I would
found
say.
anything on the web that corroborates that. I
Now,
mean,
when I say jobs, they're like, there'll be a management team there, there'll be maintenance people, there'll be technicians. that
it's
kind of
too
thing.
loud in a data center for people to actually work. I mean,
Someone's
so-
got to keep all those servers going and maintaining them, and
yeah, but that's like a crew of 2 or, I mean, that's my
I'm just telling you what I've
research.
heard.
You can go research it and see what you find.
Yeah.
But in my specific research, I was not able to find that data centers employ anybody. I mean, groundskeepers,
Well, but
and janitors.
Even if it employed 50 people, the data that is collected in there, AI in itself is replacing human jobs. AI, that's what it's built to do. That's what it's doing. AI is taking over human jobs. We will have self-driving cars. We will have all of these things because we don't need humans to do the jobs that we used to. And so to say bringing in AI data to promote jobs is not necessarily true. But let's get back to, I think we're missing a big point on this here. We're saying this is the wave of the future. This is where things are going. Other states are doing this, so we have to do this. We already, like Dorn said, we produce more energy than Oklahomans can use. So to say, oh, this is coming here and we are doing this bill, I think we all agree this bill facilitates more AI data centers to come here, correct?
Yeah, so I think there's maybe we're saying the same thing, but 2 different ways of saying it. So we produce more energy in terms of natural gas, oil, even solar, wind, than we use. That's correct.
Yes. We're current a net exporter.
But to take that energy source and actually get it to where it's electricity requires generation and power plants and stuff like that. And so I think that's where we're maybe differentiating, is we're exporting a lot of power out of the state, which isn't a bad deal, because we're using our jobs and resources and making money when we sell it overstate or whatever. But if we can use that same power that we're overproducing to produce wealth in Oklahoma and create jobs and increase our economy, and the money just keeps going, trickling down, I think that's good for everyone versus sitting it out of state. And I think, but we will need some more generation to take that energy and actually make it into electricity. Does that make sense? Like on site. And, and something else about behind the meter that I think that you guys may like is, I know in northern Oklahoma, we had a lot of controversy about transmission lines, eminent domain, because, you have a lot of power being produced. In this situation was Northwest Oklahoma with a lot of wind, and they were trying to get that across to Tulsa, basically, because Tulsa is connected to the grid that goes farther east. And so they're trying to get that power more marketable onto the grid. And that took transmission lines. And as you know, some people don't want that was coming through their property. And so one good thing about this is these are huge power sources, like these data centers, and they would have to produce the power on site, which means there wouldn't be transmission lines going from one place to another to get the power to that plant. And so it would actually help mitigate risk of transmission lines and eminent domain in the future if that was all generated on site, which I think is a positive for what your group stood for last year when we were opposing a lot of transmission lines. And
right.
Yes.
Well, let me keep going here. So what you're saying is the Oklahoma taxpayer has to cover the risk for private businesses through our government giving tax dollars to large businesses.
I'm not saying that. I never said that.
I think what he's saying is what I was saying, because we were talking about, tax credits. So I think that Jeff was backing up what I was saying.
Now I will say, so I'm a believer. There are some tax credits for businesses that make sense, that everyone gets opportunity to take advantage of. The Quality Jobs Program in Oklahoma has been a very good one. R&D tax credits have been really good because it's helped produce innovative products, and those companies grow, and then their income tax pays Oklahoma more than what we paid in R&D. So I think there are good things, but where I struggle with, I voted against the canoe. I voted against Panasonic. I voted even against the aluminum smelter, not because I'm not for economic development, because I really am for economic development. I just have a hard time taking Oklahoma taxpayer monies and giving it to one particular company, especially if that one company's even out of state or out of country or out, international. And so now I understand why we did as a legislature, because it's a huge opportunity. This smelting plant will be a big deal. I really think it will be. I know there's some environmental concerns, which I think they need to, and even community buy-in locally, I think is very important that they have to get. But as a big picture, aluminum manufacturing in the United States is almost nothing. Like we pretty much buy all of that material from overseas. And so having that plant in the United States, I think is a good national security issue for our supply chain in America. And a lot of that goes to the aerospace and defense as well, our military. So I do think there's very good advantage of that. I just struggle with being from Southwest Oklahoma. How do I come back home to my local district and explain that we're, taking all this income tax or this Oklahoma tax money and giving it to one company? That was my struggle. Yeah. But on the other side, my colleagues that did vote for that, I can understand why they would, because you're talking 4,000 jobs potentially that are up to $80,000 a year average pay.
And okay, well, I'm going to stop you right there. And here's the reason why. And I'm going to go back to canoe, because it's not just canoe. It's NextEra, it's wind energy. I mean, I wrote a pretty long piece in the Federalist about this specific thing. So a tax credit in general really doesn't help it may help the business, but it so alters the economic sphere that basically everybody ends up losing, because now we're on a wobble instead of an actual even playing field. And I think beyond that, what I wanted to kind of communicate too is every time, well, and you hate to say every time, because then that you make a liar out of yourself, but so many times I hear, oh, we have to do this because there are going to be so many jobs and there are going to be millions of dollars and there's going to be this and this and this. And we hear all these great things. And there's been not one iota, one scintilla of evidence that there's actually going to be this. We just hear talking heads say, this is going to be this is going to be this. Well, I can tell you for a fact that it doesn't work with NextEra. There aren't any jobs. I mean, I've written about it. There aren't jobs in these wind turbine areas. They're not coming. They're not there. If you look at canoe, we're going to have 1,500 people. We guarantee that we're going to have 15. Yeah. Do you know how many people they actually employed from Oklahoma? I think it was 10.
Yeah, I don't know. In Oklahoma City, I think they had 200 or 300 employees, but still way lower.
No, they were shipped in from California.
Were they? Well, I'll tell you this also, Jenny. And like I said, I voted against those bills, so I'm not here. I'm not trying to defend the other side, but what I will tell you is a lot of these, the way they're structured. I know the one with a canoe, and also the one in northeastern Oklahoma, the aluminum smelting plant. It's all based on jobs. So basically, if they don't hit those numbers, they don't get what the legislature was promising them. So it's not like a lot of people think they're getting this big lump sum of money. They don't produce, they leave, and then they just walk away with their money, when that's not the case. Basically, they get different steps. And once they hit certain criteria, then they get, they kind of get crumbs here and then crumbs here over time to get to
that. Right. And that was the same way with canoe. And we fronted them up $1 million, and then they were supposed to return it, which they haven't, because they declared bankruptcy, which you could basically look at Solyndra in California and say, oops. Yeah. So and the point I'm trying to make is the overarching point of, and we've got a bunch of comments here that I know I need to get in, but I want to share my screen with you, because I'm trying to kind of make an overarching point here that I feel like is important. So let's talk about the particular thing that's going on in Chickasha that that you guys have talked about with the behind the meter legislation and this big project that a man from California, Chet Hitt, is trying to.
He's from Anadarko. He's a Oklahoman. He graduated from high school in Anadarko, which is a town southwest.
His main work has been in California. I mean, he lived there.
Then he lived in California, became very successful, came back to his high school class reunion and saw the leg lamp in Chickasha and was like, wow, that's pretty neat, And so he kind of spent time in Chickasha downtown and was like, hey, I think we can use.
So the leg lamp that's under that Warner Brothers is suing over?
Yeah. So that one. So basically, but through that, he saw that and was like, hey, I want to go check out downtown Chickasha, and saw, hey, you know what? We could develop this property around this area and kind of revitalize it. And so we started investing in Chickasha then. And through that, this other thing came up down the road. So yes, he has been from California. He lives there many years, but he is an Oklahoman, graduated from high school here, and now has chosen to invest back here in Oklahoma.
Right. So let me just say, so Lightfield Energy is one of the organizations, private organizations that has been identified in this. And so I went and looked up Lightfield Energy. They're an end-to-end nationwide provider of solar. And they have lots and lots of solar farms. And it was interesting to me when and our friend Nian Clinton, who's from Enid, who's fighting a big solar project there, likes to make sure that we don't call it a farm because it's not a farm. We're not growing anything there. It's just a solar project. But I found it interesting on this Dalton Hay Farm, Amstead Produce, Bateman Dairy. So this particular organization, Lightfield Energy, is taking agricultural arable land and turning it into things that look like this. So I'm not sure how Chickasha might feel about that. Now maybe that's not what they're going to do, but then when I went and looked, and they said that they were interested in doing a data field, so or a data project. So I went and looked at their website and projects and all of the things that they have on here. They have never one time done a data center. So when you talk about people coming into an area and completely reimagining that space, but then they've never done that before, the chances of a failed project go up drastically. And it was interesting too that when I was looking into this particular situation, they were talking, this is in Oklahoma Energy today, massive behind the meter project announced in Chickasha. And so they talked about this guy, Chet Hitt, coming in to do this, and that it was going to be a venture between Citizen Capital and Lightfield Energy, led by Citizen Capital's executive chairman, Bon Payne, and Lightfield Energy founder, Billy Sorensen. And they're including data centers, they're doing this stuff. So I went and I looked up Bond Payne, and this is Bond Payne. This is his LinkedIn page. And he actually was worked with Governor Stitt. He was his chief of staff. And he apparently, I don't know if that's Bond Payne or somebody else, but this is on his page when Governor Stitt met with the Council on Foreign Relations with the which is a very interesting situation. So it frustrates me to see things like this. And then I guess that's the thing. When I went and looked up Citizen Capital, it's a 2-year-old company. Mm-hmm. So this is a capital company for investors, people that are trying to make money off of this new wave of Trump says we need to have AI kind of a thing. So right. I guess what I'm trying to get across to you today, Representative, is lots of things sound good, but when we don't really study the pieces that are behind the parts, we get canoe, we get Solyndra, we get people who are displaced from their property and don't have access to clean water, or whatever that might be from whatever these things are that are being brought in. So can you kind of understand that concern I think that people have?
No doubt, I can see the concern, and I tell you, the Chickasha facility in general, I can't talk about what else Lightfield has done in the past as far as what they use. It looks like they've done quite a bit of solar, but if you're going to build a data center, reliability for power is the number one important thing in controlling your utility costs, because it's such a power user. And so they're not going to use an intermittent source of power as their only source, number one,
No.
because it makes no sense, right? I mean, even solar and wind people will tell you they feel like they complement the base load, right? Because their power is cheaper due to a lot of reasons. A lot of it's federal subsidies, which I don't agree with those either. But at the end of the day, you got to have a base load to have power 24/7 reliability, and then you have the solar or wind as a complement at a lower cost when you can use it. And so I can imagine them doing, like you said, solar only at these facilities, because what are they going to do whenever they don't have sunshine, right? And you can have battery backup, but not that much. And so the Chickasha location in general, what I've been told, will be all natural gas. Like, there's no plans for solar, all natural gas. Now, are they telling me the truth? I think they are, but that's what they're saying, and it makes sense because there's two huge pipelines, natural gas pipelines, that go right through that industrial park. So it's like perfect location. And so I believe that. And, I know on the podcast, was it last week that y'all talked about behind the meter, and you're talking about how they're just going to have just a little bit of natural gas, because our bill stated that they have to use natural gas as a component of their power generation. Now, we didn't put a percentage in there because every company has their own portfolio on what they want to do as far as percentages go. But we know they got to have a base load. And if we require natural gas to be a component of that base load, they're going to use a good amount of natural gas, but they may offset some of that with wind or solar if they want to complement it. But the reason even the Petroleum Alliance was okay with that is because we know we have abundant natural gas in Oklahoma. We know it's affordable. We have tons of supply of that. And we feel like if they have to have natural gas on site, that will be the base load that they choose. And that's still going to be a large portion of what that data center would use for generation. And we think
that's something that,
real quick, Jenny, we think this could be one of the biggest natural gas generation bills that we've ever had, as far as increasing our natural gas production in Oklahoma. And we're talking about this will benefit so many oil and gas operators and royalty owners, right? Royalty owners that have royalties on their property, that will help them as well if you get more production out of it. And really gross production tax for the state of Oklahoma, we get that as well. So, at the end of the day, our state still, we are we're a lot more diversified than we've been in the past, but we're still a very oil and gas state. And this could help drive that industry upward as well going forward.
So you said something when you were talking about, this is the reason the Petroleum Alliance liked this bill. And I guess that's kind of
we had a whole group. We had a coalition.
I'm speaking for Sandra now, so Sandra can tell me to shut up. But Sandra just recently, and I don't want to speak for her, but she just recently went to Texas, where she was invited to speak to the legislature. And it was interesting. She said when she came back that there are actually human people that are allowed to actually come and speak during legislative debate about a bill. And we don't have that in Oklahoma, because we have things like the Petroleum Alliance and the infinite number of 2,000 plus lobbyists that descend upon our state capitol that get to speak instead of us, the actual regular people, because we're not allowed to come to the microphone and say, well, you know what? I have red bed power plant in my backyard, and because it's a power plant, a data center wants to come in and ancillary off of that power. And so, and because, we're open for business here in Oklahoma, and that's the super most important part, I get to have the possibility of having a very loud resource sucking data center in my backyard, along with the very loud red bed power plant.
Likely on CLO land. Don't forget that part.
Oh, that's right, on CLO land. So I think, part of when we get crossways and talking over one another, and when, Sandra and I both, or independently, get frustrated over things, it's that kind of thing. Well, I don't really care about the Independent Petroleum Association, even though, I like that. I care more about what's happening out with the people and what they feel about certain bills rather than the lobbyists. But again, and I think
I will
say something.
Jenny,
I wanted to get some comments in. Yes, I'm sorry, Representative.
No, sorry. I will say, Petroleum Alliance, Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's, go down the list. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of lobbyists up there, but they are representing.
A lot of them that used to be former representatives, which
some of those as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what I was saying though is they are representing their members, like whatever group they're advocating for, and so, but still that doesn't mean. I've seen a lot of associations where their group supports a certain policy, but maybe individual members within their association may be not supporting of it. So you see that sometimes, but at the end of the day, I feel like everyone has a voice up there, at least with me. And I think with a lot of members too, that, now during a bill presentation, I've not seen a lobbyist when we're trying to present a bill in committee, I've not seen a lobbyist. Now, I'm not saying there hasn't been. I've not seen a lobbyist get up there and answer questions. Like that's the member's job. Now, interim studies.
I guess maybe that only happens in education or something.
No,
when I was going to all of the education.
But what I was going to say is in interim studies, we do have lobbyists speak on behalf of whatever industry on interim studies, but we also have.
I'm talking about education committee meetings, them standing up and getting the mic. So,
also Representative.
I served on education committee my first 2 years, and after that, I asked the speakers, put me anywhere but education because that's the most controversial place to be.
Yeah.
And,
but I see agencies get called into committee meetings to speak to things.
I do see that, yes.
And so they are lobbyists for the DEQ or for that agency, and to say they don't get a voice. And so what I saw in Texas was I had to go up to a kiosk that day, sign in, and I could speak in a committee meeting. Anyone could. They asked us to be there. So we went and we signed in. My daughter signed in. 17 years old, and she spoke to the Texas committee on that issue. And we each got our 2 minutes. And then they could ask you questions and extend that time, but anyone could. And that meant we were starting that meeting at, I think, 1:00 in the morning, and we went till almost 4 a.m, but we were happy to be there because we got to have a voice. So I would encourage you to put in legislation that would give the people an actual voice where we get to go in there and speak, because otherwise this community where a farmer lost 56 cows to his neighbor using toxic biosolids, he would not have gotten to have a voice in that committee meeting. But the agencies, if it had happened here in Oklahoma, the agencies that were protecting it would have all gotten their time. And the one impacted, would not. So in Oklahoma, we don't even have that right. But I do want to go back to that Oklahoma is clearly doing this because we see the trillions of dollars that we can generate for certain industries through energy production for AI data centers, which are going to be the main users of this, not humans. Our Oklahoma humans have plenty of energy right now. So to say we Oklahomans would have to provide the money to increase this energy, it's not for us, it's for AI, which we already established is to collect data and to generate things that will then replace the jobs that we currently have that are by humans. But I want to say one more thing, and I know this is another podcast. And I've heard this multiple times, this is coming. There's nothing we can do to stop it. And so we just have to get on board with it. Well, okay. Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. Now, I just heard a story about the CIA investigating the death of a little girl by suicide who was cyberbullied into killing herself. And they spent a lot of money and a lot of resources trying to discover who this person was that had cyberbullied this 10-year-old girl into killing herself. They finally found the culprit, and it was AI. So while we're talking about money and jobs and who it's going to benefit and what it's going to do, not to mention the fact that this is going to price out farmers not able to compete with these industries who are going to be buying up land to put solar, which is subsidized, and wind to produce more energy. Let's just talk about the moral aspect of something that they're already saying this could be an existential threat to humanity, and artificial general intelligence on top of just AI. I mean, everyone needs to look that up. And then there's artificial super intelligence. And some people think we're already at artificial general intelligence. So when we say, oh, this podcast is hosted by an AI data center, yes, one that's already built. We don't need another one to host this podcast. I would gladly, and I do often.
What about the next person that wants to do a podcast? Do they not? Yeah. They want theirs hosted too.
Yeah, already. I'm about to start doing all my live videos on Facebook and say this will self-destruct in 30 days because it will go away on Facebook, and I don't care. I'm like, I don't need to have a jillion photos of my kids' cats on my phone. We could all be doing less, and I would gladly give up in order to bring back that little girl.
Yeah. And well, I'll tell you, and that's horrible about that girl. That's the first I've heard of that. But in general, I think we would all agree social media in general has probably caused a lot of people in depression. I don't know how many people have been bullied through social media or maybe committed suicide because of peer pressure or
but we're going to get off of the topic.
Well, I was just going to say social media in general, I think is a big concern with AI. But like we're literally doing this on social media right now. And so
but this is an entity. Okay. So this is like, from my perspective, I could care less who makes money on this. I could care less about the energy on it. What I care about is the future for my children. I personally know a little girl who her best friend is an AI bot. And now, because she is engaged with this, she does not know if she is a girl or a boy. She has anxiety, depression, all kinds of things, identifies as a they. I've heard about children who are watching their little cartoon on their YouTube or whatever, and their parents happen to look over and see X-rated images popping up in the ads. The parents took the device and watched that show over and over and over again to try to see those X-rated images, and they could never get it to come up in the ads. They handed it back to that child, and immediately those X-rated image ads came back up. It's literally looking for the child's face and targeting them with this. I can put in the comments, and I will, a pastor addressing this and the level of demonic stuff. If I had had time this morning, I found an app, AI, and this app, you can take your picture, Representative Boles, your video, and then put you in another scenario, any scenario, and draw. And I'm a pretty good artist, let me tell you. You can draw whatever you want that background to be, and it will put you into that scenario. Right. So that means, Representative Boles, you could be a porn star next week.
Okay, so let me.
I'm just saying we don't have to be the host. We are choosing this. And I don't want Oklahoma to be the host for something that is woe to whom that comes. And that's my perspective, beyond the fact that it's going to take up our land and it's going to outprice farmers. So, okay, I'm done.
Okay, so let me, we've got to get some comments in here, but I did want to show you this. So there is a thing called Data Center Watch. It's actually a whole website, and the website is dedicated to $64 billion worth of data center projects have been blocked or delayed amid local opposition. And I just wanted to show this to you because it is, I mean, literally, local activism threatens to derail the U.S. data center boom. It's not as though people in Oklahoma just are the ones that don't like them. I mean, this is literally something that's bipartisan backlash. AI infrastructure isn't always welcome. Data centers are the new NIMBY flashpoint, not in my backyard. So you might want to look at this particular website, and I'll go back up to the top so you can see it. It's called Data Center Watch. You might just look at that. They have all kinds of information about why people are concerned about having data centers in their backyard or even in their state, for example. So I do think that one of the things that frustrates me about, and we talked a little bit about something that frustrates me, which is this: I'm going to assure you we're going to have this many jobs. I'm going to assure you we're going to have this much in community investment, you know, that kind of thing. And I do think it's important to remind people that NextEra, for example, has reneged on some of their property tax valuation in the western part of the state. And so that has actually removed money from schools that they had promised. So a lot of things can happen in the initial startup phase, and a lot of things can be said. But then what happens, we have to be super, super cautious about what the possibilities are beyond the startup with anything, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think, and that's really why I was a little maybe perplexed about why people, well, like some of the comments on my Facebook post last week is, this is literally private industry making private investments without taxpayers subsidizing them. Like behind the meter is giving them opportunity, do their own power generation, invest their own hundreds of millions of dollars, not ask the public to help, not ask PSO, OG&E, Cotton Electric, maybe the city, whatever city you're in, to provide that power generation that they need. And really this protects. Now, if you want to be against data centers or AI, that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm just talking about whether they come here on the grid or off the grid. If they come off the grid, I think it helps reduce ratepayers' risk and their costs going up. Now, other generation may increase your costs for the utilities, and you know they got to pay for their infrastructure. But if we can relieve the grid on some of this infrastructure that is really the ginormous loads, then I think it's a win for everyone. Now, I do think, Jenny, you used to be the mayor of a small town. I was as well. I think it's very important for any business, whether you're a data center, industrial company, whatever, wind, solar, or oil and gas, like to have good community relations, right? You want to get community buy-in. You want to do answer their questions. You want to be a good steward of the environment, the property, the wastewater, all those things. It's very important for any industry to be good neighbors. And you know, if you're in a data center and let's say it's going to cause issues with just the immediate neighbors, then you would want to get them on board or try to locate somewhere where there's not a lot of neighbors, like in Chickasha.
Yeah, well, that was going to be because as mayor, I would have said, if people don't want it, then you're not welcome here.
Well, the question is though,
I have to protect the liberty of, you know, my property owners and the people who live in my town.
But here's the question, and this is what I struggle with in the legislature, and sometimes is when you have property owners on both sides, right? You got property owners that want it, you got property owners that don't want it. And so then you got to figure out, you know, what's the right thing to do and what's the fair thing, and go through all that. And so, I mean, it's not always, as you know, as mayor, there's not always black and white issues. That's an easy answer. Sometimes you got to do a lot more work and dig into it. And that's why the one in Chickasha, it's in an industrial park. It's literally a, 320 acre industrial park that's meant for industry. And so that's a lot.
No, for sure. But I mean, just because it's in an industrial park itself doesn't mean that there aren't effects to the people who live around the industrial park.
And I agree with you. But also know
industrial park is a little bit in question. Hold on, Sandra. What?
I have a question. So in Memphis right now, Elon put in an AI data center, and in order to get it up and online very quickly, they put in a lot of gas generators. I believe it was 32 or 34 gas powered generators. So then they could provide more and more and more power to this giant AI data center. But the people in the community, largely not well-off economic community, are now not able to breathe the air because it is so incredibly toxic from all of the gas fumes. So I'm concerned, will this bill, because, you know, one of the things, they will not be a public utility, so they won't be regulated like a public utility. So what level of, is there anything within this legislation that's going to regulate them, make sure that they are abiding by safety measures? I mean, I know we've killed every bill on setbacks to wind and solar. So already we don't, like, even within the behind the meter bill, you could have actually put in, if you're going to use solar or wind, this has to be set back this far from the property line of what you buy. Like, that could have been within this bill that you put in, even though it wasn't a statewide property rights issue. It could have been, if you're going to generate behind the meter power, this is the way you can do it. This is how much gas you can use. This is the emissions. This is the regulations. This is how far your wind turbine has to be from Jenny White's house next door. This is how far your solar has to be from a property.
Well, I'll tell you.
I don't see any of that.
Yeah, so I'll tell you. So there's federal laws and regulations for power plants. So,
but not.
They have to abide by all of the federal laws and regulations that there are, and there's a lot of those. And so, as far as environmental and air and all that kind of stuff, there's the what is the Air Act?
Clean Air Act.
They got to abide by that. And so there's all of these things that they already have to abide by. And so, as far as setbacks go, you know, obviously we had a bill that dealt with that, and it didn't make it through the process. It actually died a few times, and we brought it back and tried again. But, and you know, that goes, and not that we're talking about setbacks, and that's a whole nother can of worms. We, you know, could probably have another podcast on, but at the end of the day, that's another issue that's really two different competing property rights. And you know, you got the property right of the neighbor that doesn't have any wind or solar on their property, and you got the property right of the people that want it on their land, and trying to balance that as you saw.
Yeah, but I'm going to stop you there if you don't mind. I mean, I hate to keep doing this and sounding like I'm such a know-it-all. But here's the thing about that. So it is a legitimate legal thing, for lack of a better word, since I'm not an attorney. If what I do on my property, because I have it's my property, you know, I'll do what I want. But if I do something on my property that directly affects the enjoyment of the people on the property next to me, I may not do it. I mean, and courts have found this over and over and over and over again, from light pollution to big fences to barking dogs so I do get kind of relatively tired of that, because that's just not true at all.
Right.
I mean, that's why there is a very clear property right of the person who owns the property. If my next door neighbor, which they kind of do actually, have outdoor lights that can be seen from space, you know, I need to go next door and go, can y'all like maybe not put on every light, you know, so whatever. And if you can't work that out, then I have every right to take my property, my next door neighbor, to court and say, you know, I can't even see the night sky because my neighbor has so many lights on that it can be seen from space. So there is a very specific lawful property ownership, property rights, and in ownership.
No, I agree. And, you know, I represent a lot of unincorporated areas in my district, a lot of county areas, and particularly like the Bridge Creek area, if you're familiar with Bridge Creek.
Yes. Well, is it still there? I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's about 8,000 or 9,000 people in that school district, and they're not a municipality. So it's all unincorporated. A lot of those people moved from the metro, so they're used to all the zoning in the cities and protections, and they get out there and they're like, hey, wait a second, my neighbor, in my opinion, the neighbor is devaluing my property because of the way they have their front yard, or maybe they're not mowing their grass good, or whatever situation. But technically, it's like, well, you're in the county and there's no zoning, and so I've dealt with that issue a lot. Now, whenever you're talking about solar and wind, like I said, we did have a bill, and here's the thing: there's a lot of different opinions in the legislature on this topic, as y'all know, and the Senate had a bill that they felt good about, but House had issues with, and our bill that we passed the House, the Senate had issues with, and we couldn't get on the same page. And so I'm sure that topic's not going away anytime soon. But that kind of goes back to, what's frustrating sometimes in the legislature. Everyone can agree we may need to do something, but we can't agree what that is, because everyone has 30 different opinions of what their solution is to that problem. And so that's kind of where we left in the legislature. And, I know that's a big topic for y'all. Now, I will say, on a positive note, last year we passed wind decommissioning regulations, and this year we passed solar decommissioning regulations. So there wasn't any regulations what happens whenever the company goes out of business, or if they were to just up and leave, what happens to that property. Now, I will say property owners can have their own contract, right, with their own attorneys, but there was no statute in place that had a baseline of what those contracts had to meet as far as a threshold. And so that's what we did. We put a threshold in place to protect landowners that have these on their property. So if these companies were to up and leave, their legal contracts have to at least meet the minimum of the baseline of the state statute of protections.
Well, let me just go back to something that you said a minute ago, because I have, yeah.
Okay. I want to go back to what you said. You can sue them if they're infringing on your rights, right? That's what you said, Jenny.
You're right.
Okay. According to Senator Julie Daniels and Representative John Pfeiffer, look up Senate Bill 1115 that was put through this time. Thankfully, it did not make it through. It stopped at the House Judiciary Committee. A public nuisance, blah, blah, blah. A public nuisance. The manufacturing, marketing, and selling of lawful products shall not be deemed a public nuisance. That's new law. So that means your wind or your solar company that would be selling energy, which is a lawful product, would no longer be deemed a public nuisance. And so they were exempting them from liability with this legislation. And then you don't get to sue for nuisance. And that bill, none of us were paying any attention to. And it actually passed the Senate 38-8. So while we're over here saying, and I even had legislators tell me, oh, well, if this is so bad, you can just sue. You can just sue for nuisance. If the infrasound bothers you, if you have any of these problems that you say are so bad, you can sue the wind turbine company. And meanwhile, they were putting through legislation to take the legs out from under communities, and it names communities, take the legs out from us, even being able to sue for nuisance. So it's hard for us, Representative Boles, and I know that wasn't your bill.
Yeah, honestly, that's the first I've heard of that bill, because I'm not in that committee. So
right. Yeah, no, and I just looked it up just now. I knew that there was one. A representative tipped me off on it, but I was looking at other bills that were trying to exempt, industry from liability, whether it's glyphosate or whatever those other industries are. So we have all of these industries that are requesting these bills to exempt them from liability, and then we have the citizens over here where we're so frustrated with this process of not having a voice at the Capitol, not having our say, that, like I said just a bit ago, well, last resort, I guess we have to sue to be heard or to have something done about biosolids or wind turbine blades potentially crashing through the roof of our house. And then they come over here on the backside and they sneak through these bills, taking away your ability to sue anyone. So then what recourse do we have? And I hear from people, and sometimes I delete comments on my page because I'm like, there's a level of desperation and there's a level of frustration that is scaring me. And as our representatives, as there's a lot of people, not like you, Representative Boles, who are not responding to their constituents. They're not hearing the people. I mean, when there was bills, 2 now, that have been filed targeting our donkey dairy, one of them I went up there and the senator who was running it said, well, what are you doing up here? Why don't you just have your donkey milk lobbyist come up here? And I was like, we're it. Like, we're it. Like, pretty much in the United States, we're it. There is no one representing us. So when we have people who feel like they're not only not being represented, but that their very rights to redress for their grievances in court are being stripped from them, then we have a huge problem, much bigger than all of these other things that are trying to promote industry, trying to promote jobs, trying to, like, our basic constitutional rights are being taken again and again and again. And that's where I get back to nothing and no one and no industry is more important. And I can't stand this whole, it's for national security. No, this is potentially an existential threat. And I know that's another show, but we don't have to host it here. Let another state host it. And I know everyone says, well, you can't stop it. Well, we could stop it on our turf. And that is something that as a representative and wherever we are, I don't, I respect you. I don't know where you stand on all of these issues, but we don't have to be a part of something that we see as a detriment to humanity or that we see as propagating something that could harm children and the next generation.
Here's my question, Sandra, and with all respect, this is not y'all have asked me some tough questions. Do you not think social media is maybe one of the worst things for children?
Absolutely. And my kids are not on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, neither am mine. But still in general.
Yeah.
I see you on social media all the time. I'm on it. I know Jenny's on it. So I guess my point is I have a lot of concerns as well as you do. And I think social media can be used for good things and bad things. I think AI can be used for good things and it can also be used for bad things. The challenge is, where do you draw that line? And, and at the end of the day, I think we're all guilty of, we like part of it, but not a certain part of it. And, how do you do that? And kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, my challenge as a rep is in my district when I have people, very well respected people, that have 2 different opinions on the same issue. And I listen to both of them. I hear them both out, but you got to make a decision. You got to vote yes or no. And as soon as you make that vote, you're going to really take off the other side. And then sometimes they're like, well, you didn't listen to me. I'm like, well, I did listen to you, but I listened to other people. And in my opinion, this is the best thing for our state. Now, like I said, there's times where you look back and say, hey, you know what? Maybe that wasn't a bad decision. Maybe it should have been another one. But I guess sometimes it gets frustrating, even as a representative or senator, probably, that you hear your people, but you have people with different opinions and you got to make a decision. And the people that you didn't side with feel like you didn't side with them because you didn't listen to them, when really a lot of times you just have to make a tough decision. And what I try to do, I could probably do better, is go back to those same people and say, hey, look, I didn't go with you on this bill. This is why. Try to explain it. They may agree, they may not agree. Jenny, you talked about people in my district, Carrie, Janet, Christy, great women. We probably agree 95% of the time, but there's about 5% of the time that we may not. And Jenny, they're very vocal and they're very opinionated on their issues, which they should be. And sometimes I go to them and say, hey, we don't agree on this, but here's the reason why I voted this way. And they may not, like what I voted on, but they respect that. I try to let them know why I didn't see eye to eye with them on that issue. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, people out there listening, if your representative senator doesn't vote the way you ask them to, sometimes it doesn't mean it's because they didn't listen. It's because they just had a different opinion. They thought there was other people were also talking to them, and they felt that maybe they went with that direction because they thought that was best for the district or the state.
Well,
it's not always lack of listening, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, and I think, communicating with your district, I mean, like Sandra said, you get maximum points for that because there are a lot of people who just flat don't. A lot of reps who just don't.
Well, it's tough. It's you're mayor, Jenny. Mayor of Luther, how many people did you upset in your mayor term?
Enough to get me fired.
Well, my point is but it's not a lack of you caring, right? You care, but sometimes you just have a different opinion on what the answer is.
Well, but here's the bottom line. I don't know. Do you remember Sally Kern by any chance?
I've never met her. I know who she is, but I've
Okay. So
never met her.
Sally and I were great friends, and I still consider her a friend. I mean, when I run into her, we give each other a hug and go, "Ah," like girls do.
Yeah.
But Sally had a thing like a rubric that she would decide every bill by. And she would start with the Constitution, the federal Constitution, then go to the state Constitution, and then she would just go to the general cause of freedom, right? And so when people complain to her about bills or, well, you didn't vote for this, or, I asked you to vote for that. She was like, well, remember, you elected me. And I said, here's my rubric. Here's how I decide how I'm going to vote on a bill. The Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, the state Constitution, general liberty, right? So if you have a rubric like Sally did, then you don't have to explain, because you're like, hey, you elected me. I told you this was my rubric that I was going to do, because what I'm mainly concerned about overall is your ability to live and enjoy the fruits of your labor. That's what I'm here to do, is to protect that.
Right.
And so that's what it is. Then here's my rubric for doing that. And if that upsets you, then you probably don't need to revote me, again, because again, here's my rubric. So I understand what you're saying. And lots of representatives that I talk to say that very specific thing, but my answer is always the same, which is, once you establish that rubric, which lays directly on the foundation of protecting the gains of your own, everybody's own work, then that's what we need to do. But we're going to have to get off of here, because I know you wanted to just do an hour, and I warned you that things can go quickly.
I can't believe it's been an hour.
You said something about, and here's the bill. You said Sandra asked you a very specific question about, who is going to monitor these behind the meter facilities. And you said, well, that's in the bill, but it's not in the bill. So the only thing that it is it says number 2, the term commission shall be taken to mean Corporation Commission of Oklahoma, provided that, and then that's all redacted down to be, hold on, redacted. And then it says the term public utility shall not include or be taken to mean a corporation, association, company, individuals, blah, 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 blah. So I can't really figure out where it says, and I hope I picked the right one, because it said enrolled. So
yeah, this should be the right one.
So it doesn't say that in there.
Yeah. So if we put the federal law for regulation power generation, it would probably be 100 to 200 more pages long.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't even refer to that.
Well, I mean, it's still the law of the land. Whether we don't.
So federal.
We don't quote the federal
so
statute in every bill. You know what I'm saying? So basically, all of that's still in effect. That protection.
Right, but that's federal and not state.
Right, but they have to get federal permitting as well. They have to get federal approval, and they have federal guidelines, and so, yeah.
So we're just relying on the federal guidelines then.
Well, I mean, we could quote their entire statute in our statute, but then
no. But I'm just saying, so the Corporation Commission, for example. So I've seen a lot of green energy bills. Sandra and I have talked about this on numerous occasions. We've seen a lot of green energy bills that basically say, we hate the EPA. We don't want anything to do with the EPA. We want to be able to deal with all of this kind of stuff in-house in the state,
right.
And you can understand, I mean, carbon capture, that was the big
privacy
thing about.
You're talking about privacy. So basically, like if the EPA or whatever, let's say they're administrating some sort of standard, a lot of times what you're talking about, some of the bills we passed the past few years, basically say, hey, we have to go by those same standards, but we'd rather regulate that at the local level in Oklahoma than at the federal level, because, well, even like FERC, right, with eminent domain, do you know who to reach out to at the federal level for FERC? I mean, but you do know who your corporation commissioners are. You do know who your representatives are. So if you could get that more local, you would have better representation. And now they would probably listen to you better, because most likely people in Oklahoma that were elected by Oklahomans care more about Oklahoma than maybe DC bureaucrats, most likely, that weren't even elected. And so
Except then you stick lobbyists into the.
or that, whatever. But I guess the point is, if we still have the same standard we have to regulate by, and sometimes the EPA will give delegation to a state and say, hey, here's our standard. Instead of us monitoring you self-monitor according to these standards. And if you don't do a good job, we'll take it back away from you. And so that's what a lot of these things have done. And we tried that with eminent domain this year with transmission lines, try to get that at the local level so that you have more of a voice. Because chances are people in DC making these decisions have never even visited Northern Oklahoma.
Right.
You know, they don't even know. And so, or maybe not even care that much. So that's kind of what some of these goals have been, is to get more local representation back here. But I do get your point. And, you know, maybe we could have, and hey, I'll be the first to admit any of my bills, if I have any issues with them, or over the interim, if I find out, hey, we need to add this in here or add this in there, then I'll be the first to next year file a bill to try to clean it up. And
well, and I appreciate that. I just don't want to say that something's in there that isn't in there. That's all.
Yeah, or if we just need to say, hey, refer to this standard or whatever. I mean,
yeah, it'll fall under EPA regulation.
Right. Even though we feel like that's what it is, if we need to, you know, clarify that, then, you know, that's fine with me.
Setbacks to solar and wind on that next session.
What's that?
Okay, so I want to get through some.
Thank you, Representative Boles, for agreeing to do this. I know you're like, feel probably a little bit two against one, so I appreciate
No, not at all. I've enjoyed it. And honestly, I'm kind of weird. Like, I like debating policy because it's not personal. Like, it's different opinions, and you know, I feel like I can always learn from whoever I talk to, and whatever side of the argument I'm talking to. It's always good to hear their perspective.
Well, I don't know if you need to go or if you want to stay, but we have like a bunch of comments, and I know people were putting it because we have a huge audience. I mean, it's like huge, and I know they want. I know there were some questions in there, so I don't know if we just go through them really fast. Can you stay, or do you need to go?
No, we have time. And hey, I do want to mention real quick before we get to the questions. So, for good news in Oklahoma, our electricity cost in Oklahoma is the 7th lowest in the country, and so that's good news. And the national average is 16.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And we're at right around 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So we're almost 25% lower than the national average. And so that's a good thing for Oklahomans. Now, here's the thing. You all, as well as I do, anytime your rates go up, you're ticked off because you're like, dang it, my rates are going up. But in comparison, as a state, we're doing pretty well as far as keeping our costs down and for our consumers. Just want to throw that in there. There is some positive news, you know.
Okay. So John says, when are the concerns of damages this investment's going to do to water, land are big concerns. We need both to survive. How much are we going to pollute our water and our land or use it up for tech or green energy? Where does it stop? And I think that's just something to think about, but it's definitely something for you to think about. Yeah. HB1374 helped these companies come to Oklahoma too. It lets these companies hide behind someone else to do their pollutions and not be held accountable. One bill after another, not protecting landowners. And I think you're going to hear that kind of as a theme as we go
I'll
through.
Have to look at that bill.
Subsidies make small. What?
That one didn't make it. The House Judiciary did stop it there, thank goodness. But yeah,
the House Bill 4118. Yeah,
I believe that was it. Yeah.
Subsidies make small Oklahoma businesses pay out the wazoo for big global businesses. It's grossly unethical. Facebook is now forcing AI that tracks and collects your posts and messages under the guise of being an assistant. I chatted with AI to find out how to remove it and was told by AI that I would have to delete my Facebook account and Messenger.
Yeah, it was House Bill 1115, that nuisance one. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
That's okay. The data center should be required to pay, install, maintain their own energy sources, on-site micro nuclear. That is, if they're truly private companies. The quality of everything has gone down. How much of what we have is made by slave labor? Just because it's slaves in China doesn't make slavery okay. Robots don't care how loud it is. I think I'm going to make a T-shirt out of that one. Robots don't care how loud it is. There's Michael. The problem with these data centers are that it's a centralized point of collection. As in Oklahoma, looking at the future, I would much rather have decentralized data and AI processing. And, dang it, I wish Michael were on, because he makes such a really good point there. Because just to do something, I swear, I'm just going to do this super fast. I won't make a big deal about it. So there is an organization that I used to work with when we were working on Common Core and data collection, and they're still around, actually, this organization, and it is the hold on a second, let me get to the bottom, because they have their name. No, they don't, dang it. It is the Data Policy Coalition. Data Policy Coalition, which was basically formed to stop states from allowing data collection on minors at an educational level. So they actually, on June 3rd, 2025, they actually put together a letter to members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate, basically detailing how bad this whole notion that was in the big, beautiful bill of saying that states cannot regulate AI for 10 years, and these data centers and everything else around it, the federal level is somehow dictating to the states in a federalist makeup, in a federalist world. We're dictating what states are going to do. And so they wrote this letter, basically, and they asked for representatives to sign on to it, saying that that's not right, because we have no idea how this AI is going to come into a state and take data from people under 18 who parents should be able to control all of that. And if President Trump just says, no, we're not going to do that, that's not right, because that's actually stepping in between parents and their ability to parent their children according to what might happen in a school. And so they asked all kinds of members, representatives from different states to sign on to this. And here are all of the representatives and senators from the different states that signed on to this letter. And so this is Kansas. They've got them in order: Maryland, Michigan, Missouri, Michigan, New Hampshire, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oregon.
Go back up. Was there Oklahoma there? Because
that's what I'm saying. We went from Ohio to Oregon. What happened to the K? It should be between Ohio and Oregon.
Well, this is the first I've ever seen this, so I don't know if they just skipped us.
There are no representatives or senators from Oklahoma. And if you would like, I am happy to send you the link to this, so that you can read this and the data policy organization, so you can see that. But yes, that should really concern us, I think.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people signed on, so they probably didn't know about it, because I'm sure others would have signed on as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like I said, that's the first I've seen that. But I mean, I think states' rights is important. We fought that the past 4 years under the Biden administration on how important it is to have state sovereignty. So I would agree on that.
We haven't nullified the 10th Amendment.
Those were state legislators, Jenny, that signed on to that?
Let me verify, because I don't want to say something. No, this was U.S. House of Representatives in the United States Senate, because they were the ones dealing with the bill. Gotcha. So we didn't get out. So you are excused.
Yes.
You are excused. But we do need to talk to. I need to send this to Representative Brackeen. I was going to call him Josh, but I won't do that. They don't employ anyone as far as working on the data center. If they have a problem with them, they ship them in to fix them, just kind of like they did with Canoe. So what's going to happen when their behind the meter power source dies for whatever reason? Shut down the data AI center or pull it off the grid? I think we all know what will happen.
Well, I mean, if that happened, that's a really bad deal for those investors that invested
all their money. But it's really a bad thing for the neighbors.
Well, if it's just it could be, but it's. I guess my counter to that would be, it's a bad deal anytime a business goes out of business, right, for a neighbor, because now you get an abandoned property. abandoned facility. I mean, that's never the intent of any businesses to go out of business.
I'm going to disagree because when I looked up Canoe, and that was the thing that really made me mad, because if anybody in I'm pointing now. Now I'm mad, so I'm pointing. I can't. The governor has, I don't know how many policy people. The leadership have so many policy people. It didn't take this housewife from Luther, Oklahoma, that maybe 10 minutes not using AI to come up with the fact that Canoe is basically a made up business. I mean, they had nothing behind them. The guy had collapsed in bankruptcy numerous times. I really, literally believe that they just thought that they could get this money from the state, and whoop, there you go. And then you declare bankruptcy, and it magically evaporates that ability to pay back me and Sandra and you the $1 million that we gave them.
Yeah.
They should have, then we should, and Dorn told me about this the other day, and I had no idea about this. And I know this isn't our discussion, but I'm just going to bring it up because I think it's really important and something that you might want to look into, even though you voted no on this, which was good. We had American smelters. Why did we shut them down in the first place? And now we want to build something else. Why don't we go back where they were already established and rebuild them there? See, some things don't make sense.
Well, and I think on that, Jenny, and I'm not a smeltering expert, so keep that in mind. But I think it goes with a lot of the stuff that went on offshore. I mean, it was, they couldn't compete against China, India, Mexico. And so,
but then bring it back where it was, right?
Yeah, I don't understand why. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the investor. I don't know why they decided that, but
the literal job of AI is to displace human jobs. Who will pay for the billions of dollars of all the damages data centers will cause? Plus side, robots don't need company benefits and are easily replaced, and noise doesn't bother them. What is the cost of turnover for replacing the bots? This all goes back to what Brad Boles is avoiding. Learn from your past. He does not want to hear of failures, and Jenny is doing all she can to point out there is no guarantee. I didn't do this. I didn't ask him for that,
no.
Representative.
Well,
I swear. There's no guarantee of employments of Oklahoma peoples.
Here's what I'd say to John Boy. Number one, we're not subsidizing the data centers. Like the one in Chickasha anyways, private industry is paying for that. They're investing in it. If they got a business, they lose their own money, number one. And number two, I don't know, like I'm a business guy. I have multiple businesses. There's no guarantee at any business. Like I wish there was, but you got the free market and things change. And so there's no guarantees of any future employment. But I do think, and even though I voted no, like I'm not defending, but even though I voted no on this, but I do think the way the state has set it out going forward, they have very good checks and balances with, there's no incentives going to some of these companies that you were talking about earlier until they hit certain metrics. And
right.
Therefore, if they don't hit those metrics, they get no money.
Right. But I think what John's talking about is the fact that I was showing you that these people have no background in what they're saying they're going to do.
So should we tell a company that wants to come to Oklahoma and say, hey, we appreciate that you're going to invest $1 billion here, but you've only been in business for 2 years, so we don't want your money, or we don't want you to try your business venture because you don't have a proven history? Or do we say, hey, it's your money, free market, you want to come here, we're all open doors, we hope you are successful, but if you lose, not us.
I think that to go into how, I mean, we're also discriminating against small companies, because as a small employer, if I don't meet those metrics, then you don't qualify for those incentives that the state hands out.
Well,
so, I mean, there's a whole other.
That's why I voted no, because I'm more in for the incentives where everyone gets them. If you hit certain metrics on like.
How about nobody gets them though? See, that's my point.
No, like I'm not talking. I think we're talking two different things. You're talking like the big 2 or 3 companies over the past 5 years. I'm talking like quality jobs program, the R&D.
Yeah, no, I'm talking all of that. We do away with all of this. As a matter of fact, the Department of Commerce, honestly, there's nothing in the Constitution that says, hey, government needs to sponsor a way to bring jobs to the state. There's nothing there. I mean, we
Right.
just made that up to suck up millions of dollars of tax monies and make government bigger. So the whole Department of Commerce can just go, and we'll just rely on free enterprise, which is I'm going to use my own money to come in here and do that. And if I suck at it, I go out of business.
Yeah, I understand. And, I think to me, every tax credit we have, you have to look at it very detailed and make sure that it's paying more back than what you're paying into it. Is that
Well, but then you can't, but you do, if you don't have, this is what I'm saying. So if you don't have a history with a company, you don't know. And you also have said a couple of times, and I have to disagree with you on this, that they're using their own money. We don't know. I mean, it may be completely 100% investor driven. I mean, you may be 100% completely correct. But I also know that even the Trump administration is going to offer incentives for this. And it doesn't matter whether it's a federal incentive or a state incentive. An incentive comes out of our pockets and grows government.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Okay. So thank you for listening. If our legislators are in place to represent the people, why do we hear in committee hearings and on the floor Sandra?
Then why do we all just hear in committee meetings, how does this affect industry?
Thank you. Sorry, Jeff. I could not quite get that. Yes, that's true. And that is another thing I heard you saying too, is you say that too, about industry. But again, it's about the people. Remember our metric, right?
True. But I mean, normally, industry employs people, right? And you have to have a job to provide for your family. And so, I think there's a tie there. Now, I think you got to be balanced, right? We got to have pro-economic development. We got to have pro-business in Oklahoma, because all these people in Oklahoma need a job, right? Like, they got to have a way to pay their bills, utilities. And so, I think you have to look at the whole picture.
See, that's where we differ. I don't believe Oklahoma has to be pro-business. I don't think, that's the thing, that we can't operate the state as a business, which is how Governor Stitt has done it. Because see, here's the beauty about a business, because you're a business owner, you know this to be a fact. You're the business owner. Who runs the business?
Mm-hmm.
Who runs your business?
I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does that mean that Sandra and I could say, Representative Boles, we don't like the way you're running your business. I think you should do it like this.
Yeah.
So you cannot run a state as a business, because it's not a business. We're people that have to have buy-ins, because the government is all about us and protecting us. So you can't run the state as a business. It's not a business. Businesses don't have to listen to the people who tell them how to run their business. They don't have to listen. Now, I know what the argument is going to be. Well, yeah, if people don't like the business, then they won't use the business goes out of business. I get that. And I see what you're saying, but that's not the way a geopolitical state works.
Yeah.
Well, I would say about the people.
I would say, even as a business owner, I always try to get the buy-in of my team, because they're the ones that are going to execute the mission. So if they're not on board, you're not going to have a successful business. So,
I would say to you that the job of the state, are you ready for this one? The job of the state is to get out of the way of the business.
So you're for my bill. You're for my bill.
As you possibly can.
So you support behind the meter because we're getting out of the way. We're letting business do it without government intervention, and we're getting out of the way.
Well, you backed me into that corner.
It took 2 hours to get to this point, but we're finally here. You've got to balance that with what's going on in the community as well. And if the community doesn't want a nuclear reactor in their backyard because they want to run a data center, then that's the most important thing, is the we the people aspect. I agree.
Right?
Okay. And I just think we have to take into effect all the people. Right?
Not the businesses.
No. Like, when we talk about community input and feedback, we have to,
we do need we need to have people's input.
We got to have people's input, and not just from one view. We got to take everyone's view and then do what we think is best.
Yeah.
As community leaders, wherever you're at.
Yeah.
So long as that protects people's liberty.
Correct.
Solar and wind cost more than fuels.
See, we do agree, Jenny.
Do what?
I said, see, we're agreeing now.
See, you can send all your legislator friends to the podcast, The People versus the Politicians. I'm telling
You are not supporting the behind the meter bill, and I totally agree with protecting liberty and freedom.
I can't believe you just said that to me. You're never invited on again. Nuclear, leave our power, oil, and gas alone. Investing equals money in investors' pockets, not benefiting the great good of a community. Look at what corporate hog farms did to Western Oklahoma. And this is Michael Grande, who, don't forget, came from the Panhandle. He used to live in Guyman. He grew up in Guyman. He knows exactly what that is. So I think he makes a super, super excellent point there. When a 640-acre Cielo solar complex next door is struck by a tornado, leaving a path of debris, glass, and chemicals, what protection do we have? Who will be liable for the loss of use of that land for nearby non-participating landowners? Which is a great question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would hope that company has insurance, but that's a whole different situation.
So Shelley says,
podcast.
Not answering that question. Which I think. Okay. I'm not sure. Sketchy history usually begets sketchy future. So that goes back to what I was telling you about the other issue. So if there are no protections for the people against these data collection companies, the state has basically sold our sovereignty to the highest bidder. Toyota already collects the driver's information, driving habits through a device installed in the cars with no permission or knowledge of the driver owner, and selling said information to insurance companies so they can jack up the rates. I got rid of my Ford. That's true. I heard about that for this reason. Jenny, have them do a radiation exposure test on both of those plants. We probably went past that and I forgot. Who are politicians really representing when the average rep gets a large majority of campaign funds from outside their district? I haven't looked yours up, Representative Boles. Don't know.
On the top list.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
well, he was making a point that he was, because we talked about this on the show, quite a bit. For example, I will give you an absolute example. So Kevin Wallace, who was replaced by Jim Shaw, we went and actually looked, and of all of the money in his campaign fund, only 9%, it was 9 or 13%. I can't remember which one, but it was under 15% of that came from the people in his district. So if most of a vast majority of your campaign donations are from out of your district, how do you represent your district? Because the people who are giving you money outside of your district are going to want you to rep them too.
That's a good point. It's a tough deal. I mean, because think about this: when you campaign, number one, you have to get your message out. Whether that's through obviously knocking on doors is the best way to do it, but that you can't hit 20,000 households within a few months usually. So you got to have some way to get your message out, whether that's through radio, mailers, TV ads, whatever. And so that takes money, right? And so you have different opinions. Some people are like, I don't take money from anyone. I do it all myself. But those people, it's really hard for them to get their message out. I think we would all agree to that. Then you have the people that are like, I don't take money from anyone. I'm going to donate. I'm going to put in all this money on my own. Then you have the critics that tell them, well, you're buying the election. You bought your own, you know what I'm saying? And then if you raise a lot of money across the state or even in your district, then it's like, well, now you're a slave to all those people that gave you money, and whether that's in your district or out of your district.
So do you know who your top donor is?
I honestly don't know. I haven't even looked. I would doubt that. I would think there'd be more oil and gas donations, but I'd have to.
I haven't looked. So, he could be wrong, and I'm not saying, okay,
and I'll be honest, when people make contributions, whether it's NextEra or oil and gas or farmers and rangers, I think if you ever have a politician that will sell their vote for a contribution, you need a new representative or senator.
Right, but you have to understand, though, Representative Boles, that it is very hard for people on the outside to look at ethics reports and say, well, this person and this person gave. I don't see a whole bunch of individual donations that aren't people that are attached to some big business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the people at this point in time have a right to be cynical. I mean, I really honestly do, because if you, just in case you might be unaware, the vast majority of the grassroots in Oklahoma are absolutely sick to using a barf bag over what happened this last session.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. You can't decide that you can't have rules, but then keep suspending the rules, but then put the rules back in, but then use the rules on this bill, but don't use the rules on that bill. But by the way, we're going to hold this vote open for 4 hours, but this one we're going to do for 2 minutes. It's ludicrous. You can't, no video in here. I mean, in a public, I mean, that was but according to our governor, that was the best session he's seen in 7 years.
Yeah. I mean, we did get some good things done. Is it a perfect session? No. But I mean, I do think we had a lot of good positive outcomes. And as far as bringing bills back up from the dead, the wind bill was the one we brought up more than any of them. It died in the House committee, if you remember.
No, the one you brought up more than any of them was 224.
Well, hang on. So the wind bill died in the House committee. Then the next day, we moved it from energy committee to utilities.
Or the wind step back bill?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because remember, Tim Turney ran the first one, and it was like maybe a mile setback. I don't remember. And so that failed in committee. We brought it back up from the dead 2 days later in the utilities committee, I believe. It passed there. We heard it on the House floor, passed the House floor. Well, heard it in my committee next. It passed. Heard it on the House floor. It passed. Went to the Senate committee and died, if you remember that. And then we brought up the Senate bill that came to the House, because the House bill's dead in the Senate now, right? The one that died 2 times already is now. So then we bring the Senate bill to the House. We change that one. And then it dies well,
let's just say this, because Sandra has got to get off and actually.
So my point is, like, those dead bills, it kind of happened on both sides of the, there's some that I know y'all didn't want to get brought back, but did. And I know there's some that, and by the way, I voted no on Senate Bill 224, so I'm not defending that. I voted no on that bill too. But I guess what I'm saying is, what's interesting to me, I saw some people that were like, you can't bring that bill back up because it's dead and it's already died. But then
I saw that.
But then the bill that they want to be brought back up, they're like, hey, you need to bring that back up again. And we did. And it's like, which one do you want to have it,
No.
So I think it happened both ways on different policies.
Do you know what that goes back to? The rubric or the rules.
Yeah. Well, and I will say all of them were within the rule process, but it doesn't look good. I understand the perception isn't good.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
No.
But
yeah. No. I would say the process. You had it right. It was a P word. But it's the process that's not right. So, Sandra, do you have to go?
I do. But Thank you for having me. And Representative Boles, thank you for joining. I hope we weren't too mean.
No, hey, I've enjoyed this. And,
it was fun.
Hopefully, I almost got Jenny to say she supported behind the meter, but I don't think I got all the way to the finish line.
No, you got to try.
Remember, I believe in getting halfway today, and then next time we'll get you to the finish line.
That's right. And
or
by then,
I'll get you.
Or I'll figure out how to use that AI app, and then you better watch out.
Yeah, I'm kind of nervous about that.
Yeah.
All right, Donkey Milk Lady, get your work done.
Okay.
Well, hey, appreciate y'all for having me on.
Thank you very much.
Well, if you're welcome to stay. I'm going to stay and read through some of these comments just because we have a great audience. And like I said, we have so many people on that I don't want to let them down by not reading. So you can either stay or you may exit because you've been here. God love you. A whole hour and 8 minutes and 52 seconds longer than you.
Well, I really do need to go. I got another meeting I have to get to, but
I've enjoyed
talking to y'all and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Representative Boles. We
Yeah.
do appreciate you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. God bless.
All right. Okay, you too. All right. So we have a great audience, and I just can't let you guys down. So I'm going to go through these comments that we have, because holy cow, you guys have really done so many, and I'm so sorry, because I just wanted to make sure that we were staying on topic, and we were trying to tease out the issues that we were, talking about in the first place. So okay, so Tammy said, I live less than a quarter of a mile where this is taking place, and I have no voice in any of this because we're completely unaware of any of this taking place until the big announcement. Totally hear you. I found out about the data center in Luther on the agenda because they were having somebody come to just talk about it, whatever that was about. So people, watch your city agendas, your city council agendas. Intelligence versus artificial intelligence creation versus decreation. That's well said. China military AI warfare is what we're against too. I'm with Sandra. It'll be used for demonic purposes, and our tax dollars cause us to fund it. I do not want to fund this any more than I want to fund abortion. But since taxes are not voluntary but forced, someone else gets to decide if our money is used for demonic purposes. That's no, we have to get off. I'm reading. Okay. If you think it's a win, invest your own money, not your neighbor's money. Set up a fundraiser. Will CLO land be used for construction of microgrids to support these new industries behind the grid? I mean, that's a good question. I think he talked around that answer. That is BS. For property rights, for wealth for a few is never an excuse to trump the property rights of everybody else in the area. How is Chickasha going to handle the water usage of the coming AI centers? Water usage is a huge issue. And laugh out loud. You'll do on your property what the government says you can do on your property. Wonder if we should get that one made into a t-shirt too. Property rights was used as an argument in fracking. You see how that turned out. This is a huge problem in Oklahoma too. No zoning in rural areas. Oh, I don't even want it. We need to get it. And you know what, John? We need to have a whole show devoted to just that. So let's see if we can't work that out. Wind and solar can damage health and property. I hate when they give landowners that want it the freedom to injure and damage the land of their neighbor. Paid lobbyists had their way with those setback bills, period. There is absolutely no threshold on wind and solar leasing agreements either. That's one of the problems. They have no oversight and they do what they want. We ask for common sense regulations on these corporations, not on landowners. Gosh, Nian, it sounds like you're talking about federalism. You're talking about personal liberty. Last year's HB1374 did just that. It helps keep these companies, lets them do what they want and hide behind landowners. They can pollute all they want and not be held accountable. Oh, dang it. I should have used that one. I'm sorry, Jules. I didn't see that down there. Perfect. That's like 2 for 2 for you today. Government doesn't force me onto Facebook. We're growing weary of legislators reciting the line about private property rights belonging only to landowners who are signing leases or companies standing to make money at the expense of health, safety, and farming. Bingo, Bible first, then the Constitution. Well, and I'm pretty sure, never mind, I'm not going to go there. My mom was an assistant superintendent in the school district where Sally Kern taught in East Texas. That's great. Will CLO land be used for behind-the-meter power generation projects? Dorn, I would not doubt it in any shape or form. Does AI care about Oklahoma? You know what? It might tell you it cares about Oklahoma because it scrapes a bunch of pages that talk about how great Oklahoma is. So there you go. You mean keep the corruption on a local or state level? And I know what that went back to. That was when we were talking about whether the, not the FDA, EPA. You know, when you have a bunch of 3-letter agencies, they get all scrambled up in my head. So we were talking about the EPA versus the Corporation Commission at one point in time. But you know what, though, Dorn, I do feel like, I mean, it's hard to find stuff at EPA. And I do feel like even though Lee Zeldin is telling us he's not going to, it's a different era at the EPA. I still don't think I still think it would be easier if we turn a lot of this stuff over to the Corporation Commission. Not to say that the lobbyists don't go in and steer the Corporation Commission, but I think if we, the people, would get more involved in Corporation Commission meetings and actually go and attend them and show up and that kind of thing, we could be more of a force. But then when do you work in a Corporation Commission meeting with an Ethics Commission meeting and a CLO meeting and a school board meeting and a city council meeting? I mean, Pete's sakes. We'll have social credit scoring just like communist China. Please don't let this happen. And that's true. Does this state price by kilowatt comparative analysis include family income? Ooh, that's a very good question. I wish I'd gotten to that. I'm really, really sorry, Dorn. I'm sorry. But at what point do we have a 47-hour show? Oh, yes. Businesses are created to suck up a bunch of money and go out of business. It happens all the time. It's called a scam. Keep government out of business. The end. Amen. Then who's going to clean up the mess when they go out of business? And that's my point about bringing, which you thankfully stood up for me on there, John Boy. You have my, appreciate you. But that's why I kept trying to say, you have no history on these people that are coming in and doing this work. And just because they've had solar installation after solar installation, does what? Means that suddenly they're going to be excellent at doing a data center. It's not even the same thing. Anyway, I'm with you, John. If taxes were voluntary, government would be the right size. That we do need on a t-shirt. Government being out of the way does not require a bill. Amen. Well, it doesn't. No, wrong. It does now. It's called a repeal bill, a repeal bill, a repeal bill, a repeal bill. Got you there. Tanya Jackson, let free market work. No picking winners and losers with state policy favors, period. Now, I said that. You heard me say that. Or incentives, overlooking taxes or receiving taxpayer monies. And I think that's the thing that frustrated me with Rep. Boles is me. He kept going back. Well, these incentives, everybody gets a chance to get to. I don't care. Taking my dang money. How about that? How about that? Then next, that was my definition of good is different than his. Poker face. Not gonna happen. You know it's not. And Senator Lonnie Paxton, top donor next era bill, killed SB2. Seriously, where are all the people? Darn. There might be kids watching. Let's watch the language. Okay. And that's true, but that's true. Where are all of the people that are supporting this? And I'll tell you, so Dorn, when we had the thing pop up in Luther with the data center, so the guy from that is going to create this data center, who, by the way, their company is headquartered in Georgia, and they were basically kicked out of Atlanta, so their company couldn't operate there, which is like a red flag. It's like ding, 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 ding. Anyway, what was I going to say? You said, oh, yeah. Okay. So they come in and they say, well, there are going to be 80 million jobs that are created, and we're going to give $563 trillion to everybody that, I mean, they just make up these numbers, and everybody goes, oh my gosh, that's really great. I would like to have a new firehouse and a fire engine, please. And may I have this? And mother, may I have this? And everybody starts, it's like in the cartoon, wasn't it a Bugs Bunny cartoon? Like a Looney Tunes, where the guy would go cha-ching, cha-ching, and it would come on his eyeballs and it would go cha-ching. I think that's where we are. So many of our leaders aren't thinking about what's going to protect somebody's liberty. It's what's going to, they feel like services are the most important. But if we get these things in, then I can get you a new fire engine, or I can put you in a new police car, or I can get you, but this isn't what we need. Human beings need liberty, and liberty doesn't necessarily mean we should have a new fire station or a new police station or a new fill in the blank. It means keep out of my dadgum backyard and let me keep my money. That's what that means. Bull said, hope they have good. Yeah, that wasn't a good moment. Yes. Right. I agree. 100%. Absolutely fantastic show. Sorry I couldn't be on live. I know, me too. I missed you, Michael. What good is insurance when their mess puts you out of business or kills you from the pollution of their companies? And I'm going to go on top of that, John Boy. So even if they didn't go out of business, let's say even if they didn't go out of business and they polluted the water or they've done, I don't know, X, whatever X is, fill in the blank. So then you go and you say, okay, well, I have this problem and you've killed 7 of my calves and now you're responsible because we tracked it back to you and your insurance needs to pay. And then the insurance goes, well, I'm going to take you to court because we're not going to pay that. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there going, well, so yeah, I have tons of money. I can afford to take on State Farm in a court of law because they're telling me they're not going to pay me for these 7 cows that we know that's this company pouring aluminum into the water table caused them to, have a reaction and die. So that's the other problem that we're not actually thinking about here. They aren't our leaders. They also aren't serving. They're mostly just busybodies with the title. Just the fact that was his answer. No, I totally hear you. Okay. So it has been 2 hours and 20 minutes and I'm getting off of here. It's been so great. You guys have been so wonderful. We had this huge audience for this. And Sandra had mentioned one time that she thinks that what it should be, we should have a separate podcast just dedicated to the people, because you know how I like to write that, capital T, capital P, the people, versus legislators, because I think sometimes it is a versus. And I think even though I really appreciate Rep. Boles for coming on and talking about so many of these things, so many of his answers during this podcast actively show what we're talking about, that the bottom line isn't our personal liberty. It's not that. It's what can I do for the community? And that's not the right answer. So take time. I really appreciate you being on today. So many of you, it's just been an absolute blessing for you to be on. And thank you again so much. Please, if you found something really good that you liked about this, and I would assume you did because we had hundreds of people on today live on a Wednesday afternoon. If you did, please share this with other people and let them know kind of what's going on. I will try to break down some of it, but again, you may just have to listen to it, in ear pods while you're doing something else. So thanks again for being with us. We really appreciate you being with us, and just have a blessed day. And we'll see you again Friday morning, 9:00 a.m. with the girls from Pike-Off OTA, and we'll find out how badly they did with legislation this session. We'll see you again at 9 a.m. Thanks.